You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Cyberspace, the new frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast First Contact. Its mission? To explore every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. To seek out new viewers and have new conversations. To boldly view what many have viewed before. Welcome to First Contact, a podcast all about fishing. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we are talking about the Royale. It was written by Keith Mills, who doesn't exist, and directed by Cliff Bowl. It first aired the week of March 27th, 1989. James, what happens in this episode?
Well, first I have to question the way you said the Royale. The Royale. You said that there was quite a distinct break in between Roy and Al.
And as I understood it, it's just the Royal. That's Royal. Just bog standard.
Look, this is not a podcast for nitpickers. If you want to do that, I'll go somewhere else.
I mean, unless I've made some grim mistake, we are talking about the mediocre ITV medical drama.
Yeah.
Yeah. Set in the 1960s in North Yorkshire.
A spin-off of the popular police drama, I hesitate to call it drama, Heartbeat.
That's right, set in St Aidan's Royal Free Hospital.
No, actually we're not. We're talking about the episode of Star Trek Next Generation, The Royale.
The Royale.
Royale?
Oh, the Royale!
When is a holodeck episode not a holodeck episode? When it's the Royale! Following the discovery of some old NASA debris, Riker, Worf and Data beamed down to a barren planet and found a cheap-looking revolving door. They enter and find themselves in a 20th century casino full of cliched characters. But once they enter, they're unable to leave. It turns out that the whole place was built by aliens who felt guilty about killing the crew of the Earth vessel and recreated a world based on a bad novel, where the man could live out his life. In order to leave, the away team must play out the plot of the novel and buy the hotel.
Well, it's different, isn't it? Alex, what do you think of this one?
Filled with endless cliche and shallow characters. I welcome death when it comes.
But that's the point of the episode.
No, in honesty, for the first time doing this, I don't really know how I feel about this episode. It reached the end, and I sat there and thought, well, that was definitely an episode of The Next Generation. But I had no feelings one way or the other, particularly.
It was Next Generation doing an original series-style plot.
There's no doubt about that. There are distinct elements here from the cage and a piece of the action. You can very much see the through line. But that's not really how it was originally conceived. But yeah, if you were doing this episode in The Next Generation, you would do it on the holodeck, wouldn't you?
Well, it would seem logical, yeah.
But I'm glad they didn't, because if they did, it would have been Riker, Worf and Data stuck on the holodeck again.
No, we don't want that. We want different ways for them to be trapped in sets that they know how to build.
I really, really like this episode. That is what I will say. I think they set out to do an episode which has characters who are cliched and is based on a terrible novel, and they do it. They sell that to me very well. So I really, really like this episode.
I would say that they've hit a run of form where I think the writing staff mostly have found the tone of the show and know how to tell a single story without meaningless B-plots and stuff like that.
yeah, it's perfectly good, and I quite like it. I didn't have any problem watching it. It moved along at a pace. There was a setup, and there was some plot, and there was a resolution. I can't ask for too much more in the run of a TV show. Again, the very start, some Klingons have found something, alerted the Federation. Okay, fine. So they go to the planet, and they beam up this debris, and it says NASA on it. That's a good teaser. I quite like that as a teaser. Doesn't work now, since NASA's not doing any more manned missions ever again. Tracy Tormey, who is actually Keith Mills, took his name off the show because Maurice Hurley, our good friend, he objected to the original concept, which was more of a satire, a surrealist comedy. And Hurley thought it was too derivative of a piece of the action.
But it's not, is it? It's not.
People said exactly the same thing about The Big Goodbye, because it had gangsters.
There's one gangster in this episode. There's not gangsters, there's gangster.
That's true. I don't think it's so much the gangster element, but it's more an alien society which is based on a piece of Earth culture which they have misinterpreted.
Well, no, because we have the quote by Maurice Hurley, and that's, there were gangsters in this one, gangsters in that one, and both based on a book.
Well, he is a great reader of popular culture, a great thinker, and he understands so much more about the world than we ever will. So we must always heed the words of Maurice Hurley.
And he's a massive fan of Coolio.
Some of the surrealism survived. I think it's quite an iconic image, the revolving door just in the middle of nowhere, although it looks a bit cheap, which is something that continues into the rest of that casino set.
It does look very cheap, to the extent that it doesn't look like they're actually being stopped from leaving. It just looks like they don't know how to operate a revolving door.
Much like Bernie Eccleston. Like, we're struggling to actually talk about this episode. James, you have a strong feeling about why you like it, so let's delve deep into that. We want to delve deep into you, James.
It's a shallow episode. There's not much to it. It's a very simple episode. And that's why I like it, because they have an idea and they put it across very well. That's it. The idea is, it's a place based on a bad novel. There's a few dark elements which help keep it a bit exciting. There's a bit of comedy, which they do quite well. And it's the first time that they've really done an original series style episode well in Next Generation. In the past, it's always just come across as just wrong or racist or something along those terms. This episode isn't racist. It isn't really sexist.
You know, we've been saying this quite a lot recently to justify an episode. It's not racist, it's not sexist, it didn't have rape in it.
I can't argue with you, but maybe I'm looking for something more. It's simple and well executed. Fine. Well done. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with it. I think it is solidly well executed, but that's not enough to make me love it. It doesn't have any really memorable lines. Again, the set's pretty horrible and kind of nasty looking. There is a bit of humour. I quite like it. The show does have personality now, but it's not outstanding. I would never say that this is outstanding. It is good, but not great.
Yeah, I'd go with that. It's the same for me. You know, everything's perfectly well done apart from the sets. It's just underwhelming, maybe. It never feels like it builds to a big crescendo. It sort of knocks along. They find a solution. They gradually work towards the solution, and they leave.
I don't think that there's any great sense of peril either, which you don't always need to be entertained, but the fact that they're trapped in there, you never believe they're actually trapped in there in any way. There isn't any real threat. There's no ticking clock coming down. They could just stay there forever, and the Enterprise, as it says, we'll wait for months if we have to. Don't you have a mission to go on? No, we'll just hang around. And that sense of underwhelming, I think, is in the B-plot. Not so much a B-plot, because they are working to the same solution, but on the Enterprise, it seems every 5 minutes it cuts up to a scene where Geordi and Wesley are sitting at a console and Picard asks, what's going on? we're doing this now. Okay. And then it'll go back and they'll do some stuff in the casino, and then it'll come back and Picard and Geordi says, we've discovered this thing now. And they'll go, good, we're going to do this. Great. And until eventually they manage to cut through the interference by doing something I don't understand and coming up with a solution that they're never going to use. But it's perfectly well done. They aren't doing anything that doesn't move the plot forward, because it does, but it's just a little bit... it's routine, I think, is exactly what it is.
No, but I like the fact that there's no sense of danger, really. I like that because we've had that too much. We had that last week with Contagion. We had the Romulans suddenly pop up, and they were just there just to be an additional bit of a threat when they were unnecessary. We didn't need that here. We didn't need an additional threat. We didn't need, like, oh no, at the end of the novel, Mickey D comes in with all his gangsters and kills everybody. We didn't need that.
You're right, we didn't need that. I guess I kind of feel if we didn't have that, we could have done with hitting the revelation a bit later. I think part of the problem with the flow for me was that we hit the revelation a bit too early, and then it just meant that working towards the end sort of slowed down a bit for me. I'd already reached the dramatic high point I wanted to see, and then it didn't really have anywhere to go for me. So anything after they find the dead body in the bed seemed to slow right down. Because really, after that, the only dramatic high point is when they realise about the foreign investors. Because everything else is more of the same, just, you know, wandering around the casino and gambling.
And it isn't challenging, the solution, either. You know, you've got Data there who can fix the dice and roll whatever he needs to roll to win the bet. And it's all set out. It's written down. I mean, that solution, they find the astronaut dead in his bed. He's written one diary entry, which tells you everything you need to know to get out of here. It's like that drawer is basically the magic drawer of exposition. Yep, you've got the book, you can read that. We've got this diary entry, it'll give you some instructions. There you go solve the episode.
I've got one solution for that. Maybe something as simple as the book's missing the last few pages.
Yeah, absolutely. You write your own ending.
They pick up on something they think might be the solution, but they don't know if it's going to work, but they give it a shot, and then it turns out that was how the book ends. Or something like that.
I mean, Data's already read the book, but you have the scene in the ready room with Picard and Troy reading over his shoulder, in what I think is quite a rude way, to be perfectly honest. They're both reading the book, and Picard's going, oh, this is a badly written book. Picard, who has been set up as a big fan of Dixon Hill, the pulp detective, surely this is exactly up his alley, although I think his fandom of Dixon Hill is completely out of character anyway. And actually his reaction to this, where he's quite negative about that kind of book, is far more appropriate.
And yet, ironically, he absolutely loves 50 Shades of Grey. He thinks it's a work of genius. I especially like the line here. He slaps me across the face, and I go bright red. I must be the colour of my uniform.
And you know, one other positive thing about this episode, it utilises Troy in a useful way. It utilises her magic powers.
I had a problem with her magic powers in this episode.
But they couldn't communicate with the away team, but she could sense that they weren't in danger. That was useful.
But how?
Because she's got magic powers.
But do they extend beyond the bounds of scientific knowledge?
Yes, she's got magic powers, like Superman.
What are the range of Troy's powers exactly? I mean, they can seem to penetrate a force field that the Enterprise computers can't. And I mean, they are thousands of kilometres away. Is she feeling all the feelings of everyone on the ship all of the time? Or can she, like, tune in? Like, has she got special channels for Riker? Or is it because it's Riker and he's her Imzadi that she can sense it? Would it not work with anyone else?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
It's almost as if it's poorly defined.
But that's not a problem with this episode. That's a problem with the character of Troy.
I prefer things to be poorly defined, like how the TARDIS works. I don't really want to go into too much detail. Poorly defined, it can come in useful at some point, and it's always like that with sidekicks. If you've ever watched The Dead Zone or Medium, they always seem to have the powers that they need that are useful for the situation, and that's okay. Would it have made any difference if they had just said, we can't sense them? Is it useful for them on the bridge to know that they're alive, or would it be more interesting if they thought they might be dead?
That's unnecessary tension. That's the thing, they're always introducing elements where they're just ramping up the tension, even though the audience know nothing's wrong. We don't need that.
That is a fair point. That is a very good point, in fact.
You now think this episode is brilliant.
You've made the argument, and I am now completely convinced that this is the best episode of any television ever.
See, maybe for me, it's just I kind of feel like I've seen this done before. Not necessarily in Star Trek, but I mean, it's not far removed from, I don't know, something like The Prisoner. Say, I don't know, take an episode like The Chimes of Big Ben, with trying to escape and you can't escape, and every time you think you're just about to, you find yourself stuck back in the village. And that hell of living in a place like that. Yeah, I've seen it elsewhere and seen it sort of better done. I can't get excited about it. It's there, it happened, it was fine when it was on screen. But I find it very difficult to get worked up one way or the other about it, to be honest.
Well, let's not get worked up one way or the other about it. In quickfire.
Quickfire.
Revolving door, number 1, proceed with caution. Now, I want to highlight this line because it doesn't make sense. Why does he need to proceed with caution because he's seen a revolving door?
Well, they're so used to just these doors that open in the middle that, they might try to go in the wrong way or trip up. You never know what will happen when it's revolving. I like that Worf calls the lifts turbo lifts, which actually for the first time points out how absurd it is that they call them turbo lifts when actually they're just lifts. And it's almost like, oh, we're in the future, let's call them turbo lifts. That adds an extra something, because it doesn't matter how fast they go, it's still a lift. And I suppose that is a hangover from the original series, but yeah, it sounds stupid now. It didn't sound stupid before he mentioned it, but now it does.
It's not something that you'd apply to everything, is it? I mean, turbo lift works, but I mean, you wouldn't use it for stair lift or golf caddy.
It's not like they call the doors like auto doors or anything like that, although we do have automatic doors, but I'm quite happy just for them to be doors, you know?
Well, the turbo lifts are different to other lifts in that they go in multiple directions. They go sideways as well as up and down.
It's not an omni lift, is it? It's a turbo to imply that it goes really fast.
I think omni-lift is a better description of it.
Omni-lift sounds a bit like something you take for constipation.
I thought it sounded like a kind of bra.
Because all those bras that just lift the one breast, I mean, they're terrible, aren't they? You need something that's all-encompassing.
With our new Omni-Lift system, your breasts will always point in the same direction.
I'm afraid of Mickey D too. Those burgers are so tempting, but so many calories.
The scene in the casino where Data fixes the dice is very similar to a scene in Gene Roddenberry's The Quester tapes, one of those Gene Roddenberry pilots that never went anywhere, all about an android who was searching for meaning in life. But yeah, that seems like a pretty straight lift from that. It's such a shame that Gene Roddenberry's great scripts never made it to series until after he was dead, in which case it seemed like they were just exploiting his name, but I'm sure Andromeda and Earth Final Conflict were really very much based on his ideas, and they didn't just take the names of the characters and write a completely new series. I'm sure that's true. You may recognise Sam Anderson, who played the assistant hotel manager. He would go on to play Holland Manners on Angel, which I really liked. We should do an Angel intro cast instead. I could say stuff.
It's probably the most boring fact ever associated with an episode of Star Trek on Memory Alpha. In the Geordie states that Theta 116 has a surface temperature of minus 291 degrees centigrade, and that's below absolute zero, and is therefore impossible to attain.
Well, that is probably the most interesting podcast you've listened to this year. So many strong feelings and opinions flying around. Certainly enjoyed the heated debate aspect of it.
I think it's definitely going to be the most interesting podcast about the Royale that you're going to hear today from a website with the name The Spoilist.
Our part 2 Royale review next week.
That's the Royale with cheese.
Next time we will be discussing Times Squared. We're all looking forward to that one. And now, from me, Andrew Moyer, host of First Contact, and I'm in no way trying to pad out the running time of this episode because we didn't have much to say. I wish to bid you the fondest of fine farewells as I say to you now in the words spoken so often by people departing, perhaps old friends, lovers, even family members. As they walk away, they turn around, smile, and say, goodbye.
And from me, James Kluski, connoisseur of the Royale, bonsoir.
Adieu, adios, bye-bye, cheerio, ciao, Godspeed, leave-taking, parting, so long, swan song, and toodaloo from me, taking ever longer to reach a climax. Goodbye.
That is the longest you've ever taken to reach a climax.
I bought a bag of fruit polos.
Oh, I didn't even know you still got them.
Yeah, but it's new. It's a big bag of fruit polos because I thought, oh, it'll just be like 5 in like a packet, and there'll be like 10 packets in there or something like that. No, it's just individually wrapped polos.
Oh, that must be difficult.
It is difficult. I have a lot of small wrappers around the place now.
So they don't think about the consequences of the small wrappers.
They are the greatest contributor to global warming with their wrappers.
I'm back.
You missed the conversation about individually wrapped polos.
Well, I've missed a treat there.